So many of you might be familiar with Playing for the Planet, which is an alliance that was set up by the UN Environment Program in 2019 and now has over 40 industry partners on this initiative. It's really a remarkable feat, and we spoke a lot about it yesterday with the UN and our Games and SDG Summit. So we brought together today a couple of the members and the organizers from the program to share with you what they've learned and how you can engage with this critical issue around the climate and sustainability. So we've got here today, our moderator is Deborah Mensah-Bonsu, who is the founder of Games for Good and the co-creator of the Green Game Jam, which they'll discuss as well. Sam Barratt, the Chief of Youth Education and Advocacy at the UN Environment Program. Alan Gerschenfeld, the President and co-founder of Eline Media, as well as Leslie Quinton, VP of Communications at Ubisoft. So they're going to speak about the strides that studios have made in trying to reach net zero as a business, while finding new ways to reach and teach their players. So please welcome the Playing for the Planet crew. Here we go.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? Pretty well? All right. Exciting. I'm going to put this down. I was told it doesn't look good in the pocket, so I'll just put it down here. So welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to chat with everybody on this panel. I'm also going to try to make the clicker work. We'll see how that goes, but hopefully it'll be okay. So the name of this panel is called Walking the Talk, and we're really going to try to delve a bit into what it looks like when like a studio as a business, and then also a studio with the games that they make. How does that balance work when it comes to things like sustainability and green nudges, etc. And first off, we're going to introduce our illustrious panel. So my name is Deborah. I'm the founder of Games for Good. I work in consulting for studios around social impact, but also work with Sam here at Playing for the Planet. And my panel over here, we've got Sam from Playing for the Planet, as well as Alan Gerschenfeld from Eline Media, Jennifer Estaris from ustwo, and then Leslie Quinton from Ubisoft. So we also have some background video to share with you all whilst they're speaking, just to make this a bit more engaging. But before we get to that, I like to, on a panel, maybe set the intention a little bit. And I think we're all here because we love games, because games make us feel something. And so we're going to start with a little bit of emotion first. And so they don't even know about this. I was like, there's a surprise in the beginning. They wanted to know, and I wouldn't tell them. So we're going to go down the line. I'm going to ask you how you're all feeling right now. One word to describe your emotion. Sam.
Calm.
Lovely. Ellen?
Nervous.
Hopeful.
Optimistic.
Love it. Okay, so we've got calm, nervous, hopeful, optimistic. And then we're going to go around the room again, because I would like you to tell me how you want everyone in this room to feel at the end of this panel. One word. Sam?
Up for it.
That's not one word. But if you know Sam at all, he always speaks in threes, so I'm not surprised that he used a three words for this.
And he merged them together.
Yeah. Oh, hyphenate.
Yeah. Okay. Up for it. Classic Sam.
Intrigued.
Intrigued.
Activated.
She keeps taking my words. Energized.
Okay, so we've got up for it, intrigued,
Activated.
and energized. Can you all remember that? Because we're going to come back to that in the end. And I might forget because I have other things. Yeah? Okay, great. So let's begin. So we are talking about walking the talk. What does that look like? What does that mean for these different studios? The cool thing here is that we have a nice representation of different size studios and also the kinds of games that they make. Some are kind of just incorporating things like green nudges into games with massive audiences. Others are creating games like with that intention in mind from the get-go. So yeah, we'll talk about that too. But first off, maybe Sam, who doesn't have a video in the background, can you tell us a little bit about Playing for the Planet and the sort of intention there? Everyone here on the stage, the studios that they represent are also members of Playing for the Planet. So we're going to get both sides of that. But yeah, Sam, tell us a bit about Playing for the Planet and where is it at now?
Yeah, so long story short, I think there's been a lot of good work that's been happening in games for many years to think about purpose and intention. But the UN had never really kind of docked into the industry. And so I spent a lot of time looking at what my son was spending his time on. And I play games with him. And I just thought, wow, this medium, I think, can do remarkable things if it's harnessed to really think about educational and activation opportunities. So we did some research around it. And then we had a climate summit here in 2019 in New York. And I had some really strong conversations with a bunch of very big studios about what I think they could do to learn from each other, but then also some different studios about what they could do together. So we came up with Playing for the Planet, which is a community of both studios of different sizes that can learn and benefit from best practice and come up with common solutions to deal with common problems, with the aim of both decarbonising the industry as fast as possible, but then thinking about how we can place green activations in games.
And how do you think it's going?
I'm biased, but I think it's going pretty well. I would say there's still some new frontiers for us. Not everyone's in, which is fine. But I think we like to work in a friendship modality. So we like to help where we possibly can. I do think there's a lot more that needs to be done on research in the interests of players to think about how you organize and orientate your game to what they're prepared to do. So I think that's a big thing for us to look at. But what I love about this is there's a kinship and a fellowship in this group. And I think it's moving from initiative into movement, where people are starting to think about how they can work as either frenemies in a shared space or people that could work because they have different dependencies on each other. And so if you have the engine thinking about what it could do, if you have people in dev to think about what they can do, and then the designers, then I think you're creating a whole ecosystem of impact. And that's what Playing for the Planet is. I think it's a fellowship of people with a heart and a head that want to make a difference. And we then just facilitate that to try and make magic happen.
And speaking of making magic happen, okay, we're going to go to the first studio. Jen, I believe you're first.
All right.
Let's find out. Can you tell us a little bit about ustwo and the games that you're making, and what does it mean for you when we say like walking the talk?
Yeah,
How
sure.
does the business and what you do for the players go hand in hand?
Yeah. Should I wait for the video or no? Just start. So ustwo Games is a company that's a B Corp. We make a lot of games that are about social impact. I believe our current tagline is playful experiences that inspire positive change. And that's just so embedded throughout all the games we make, like Alba Wildlife Adventure, which you see here, which was Games for Change Game of the Year recently, last year, 2 years ago. Yay! And it's an open world explorer about a girl and nature conservation and how even the smallest person can make a difference, which will be relevant to Playing for the Planet, where even the smallest studio can participate and make a difference. We also have games like Assemble with Care, which is about repairing objects and extending their life. Desta, A Memories Between, which is also out on Netflix. And that's a game about dreams in a roguelike setting and with dodgeball involved. It's wild, surreal, and it is in support of UK youth. It features a non-binary character, main character. And then games I've worked on, so Monument Valley has a new chapter called The Lost Forest, and it was made as part of Playing for the Planet's Green Game Jam. And it is about forest preservation, and it begins and ends with a call to action regarding a petition. And here's an example of it up here. And I'm working on the next Monument Valley game, directing it, and it will also have themes of climate resilience. And I'm just excited to explore it here. I'm just really proud to be working at a company where we're encouraged to be daring. And so I'm just inspired to be a part of Playing for the Planet. We're also doing a lot of carbon removals, carbon emissions evaluation, and seeing how far we can get with that too.
And then, I mean, especially from, ustwo side, because you're also a B Corp, for people who may not know what that means, can you talk a little bit about that and the sort of the higher standards that comes with that?
Yeah, so it's a certification process, quite rigorous actually, evaluating both on our sustainability as well as other socially responsible initiatives. And I feel like it's like the first step is join Playing for the Planet. Step 2 is be a B Corp. I mean, we've inverted that a bit, but I think it's something that all studio students aspire to be.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Next, we're going to go to you, Alan, and Eline Media, and I think we're here going to see some of Beyond Blue, but I'm sure everyone here also knows Never Alone, which is a beautiful game too. So I think from your side, Alan, you're really making games like with this intention of what we call like serious game. So can you talk a little bit about the approach for your studio, and then also how green and sustainability fit into that?
Sure. First, my mom used to sit in exactly this chair growing up. So when I sat in here, it was really wild.
You feel at home.
Just a little thought. But
Feeling nostalgic.
it's just very striking when I walked out here. So Eline Media, we do commercial social impact games. We're inspired by amazing people in the real world. If you know our Never Alone game, we had amazing Alaska Native partners, the elders, the writers, the storytellers. And we did a puzzle platform game, and we embedded 26 documentaries in the game that get unlocked where you meet the real people that inspired the game. And I mention that because BBC contacted us after Never Alone won a BAFTA, and they were coming out with Blue Planet 2, the ocean documentary that David Attenborough narrates, and they wanted to have a game to go along with an exploration game. And so we were excited because, similar to how we partnered with the Alaska Native community, and we didn't make a game about it, we made a game with them. When we met these amazing marine scientists, these aquanauts, who are discovering new things almost every day, most of the ocean is not explored, it was fascinating. And in many ways, I think our job is to bring the incredible privilege and joy we have working with these remarkable people to millions of gamers so that they can experience that through an interactive, immersive game experience. So our theory of change, and this one, so it's an ocean exploration game. We unlock 16 short documentaries where you meet the marine scientists who inspired most of the gameplay. And the theory of change, there's a couple theories of change. It was really important that we had a female marine scientist, and we unlock in the documentaries interviews with amazing, if you know Dr. Sylvia Earle or Dr. Mandy Joy, these are among the most inspiring people on the planet. And some of our impact funders approached just that theory of change, and we're actually tracking young people who said they wanted to become marine scientists because they played the game. And I think one of the speakers at the conference is from the Gina Davis Institute. And if you're not familiar with C. Jane and whatnot, it's worth looking into. That institute has done a lot of research as to how role models in TV inspire careers. I think it's even more so in games. Will Wright has talked for years about the number of people who became city planners because of SimCity. So that's just one theory of change. When you create a really evocative protagonist and you step into the shoes of those protagonists, you go into a problem space, you get feedback, you level up towards a goal you're interested in, it actually inspires new careers. So that's, it's a theory of change not everyone talks about. We focus on the awe and wonder of the ocean with this project. We're working on another project right now called Outlaw Ocean with an investigative journalist he was at the New York Times for 17 years. His name's Ian Urbina. And outside of national borders, 7 miles, there's really no governable laws. There's treaties that are often not enforced. So this explores things like sea slavery, illegal fishing. Again, absolutely fascinating lens on the ocean. So we're fascinated with the health of the ocean.
Yeah, really, really incredible. And then moving over to you, Leslie, Ubisoft has really been on like the forefront, I think, especially when it comes to AAA studios of what they can do with what you can do with your games. But also interested to hear a bit about the strategy as a business, because you do have so many locations and you are a massive studio. So what does trying to decarbonize look like for you as a studio? And then how does that marry with what you do in your games?
Well, we have a slightly different model, obviously, in the sense that we have 20,000 people and 30 studios and around the world. in both in the studio side, production, but also the business side. So we came to it somewhat differently also because we've been around for 36 years. And I think the amazing thing about video game production is that it's such a reflection of the world we live in, and great development teams are aware and leaders in what that looks like. So we've been always able to kind of capture the zeitgeist, what's happening within society and some of the main issues. But I think the move towards more green content, and this is a subliminal message, and more issues that are related to how we become sustainability as a society, it's been both a natural consequence of the interests of our people, and so then it's been built into each game because we have a big catalog. And we have many, many games that now are starting to do that. We've needed to find ways where it's very endemic to the brand and it fits with the DNA, because I think any player is going to feel like, okay, well, why did they slap this green label on this? So there's a lot of what we do encourages environmental thinking. Very proud of projects like Riders Republic, where we created the first climate march in a game. So it's been, the challenge is how do we do this in a way which feels natural and compatible with whatever the gameplay is, but at the same time understanding, to your point, that we have 20,000 people around the world who are also making their own carbon impact, and there's climate action we need to take around that. So thinking about how do we arrange our space differently. 40% of our physical costs are related to our spaces. So just as an operational message, we need to think about how can we be more sustainable, because it has an economic impact as well as a green impact.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then you just talk a little bit about, what you're sort of most proud of. Is there anything within Ubisoft that you can share where you think we've done really well on this?
There's a lot of successes. I'm gonna state the obvious, though, that this is totally a journey, not the destinations kind of situation. That we're working to be better and better. But a lot of things where we've started to make traction and we feel there's a real impact. We have green communities, which are and committees within all of our studios, and so it's volunteer. You're doing it as part of your business, your day-to-day. You might be a designer or you might be in tech, but you also are part of how do we live more in a more green sense. We also, though, have a group of game developers called the Green Developers, and it's 400 people around the world who just talk about how to integrate sustainability into games. And they work, obviously, inspired a lot by the things we learned from our colleagues in Playing for the Planet. But beyond that, there's this real effort to do so. Really excited by some of the kind of natural things that have emerged within games, such as the idea that when we inspire people by saying, "Hey, you can have this really cool package, or this, these neat skins you can buy," and that will trigger some kind of positive action in the real world. People love that, and there's statistics that Sam and the team and you've all put together that show how players are asking for this. So it's a natural consequence of wanting to give players things that we know will engage them. It's all about the engagement, and how do we create something which feels natural to the various brands.
Actually, that's an interesting thread to talk about, like that player piece, because I think everyone here has ideas of what the players will like, or we try to anticipate what the players are going to engage with. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've tried within your games and what has been successful, and also from a player perspective, because I think sometimes we try things that we think are great and players are like, this was awful, or sometimes they love it. So yeah, it would just be nice to hear what the experience has been on that side, sort of what you anticipated versus what the outcome was. And have your players taught you anything about how you might actually do things differently when it comes to designing for your games? And anyone can jump in here.
Well, I'll jump in with an easy one that ended up being way more popular than we even expected. So we have a free-to-play game on mobile, which is called Hungry Shark. And it's an obvious one to make a connection with the environment because of the fact that it's happening under the water. And there's a lot of beautiful, gory scenes when the shark eats the divers, but you're not supposed to eat the divers. You should try to eat other fish. But there was a component, and it was part of the Green Game, the Game Jam, where we created, for that game in particular, a component where to protect the baby sharks, and I'm sorry if I just planted that song in your head, to protect the baby sharks, you had to battle the evil conglomeration, Gluttwell Corp, and protect the ecosystem, which is a fragile coral reef. So the kind of people who play this game are not normally interested in thinking about that. But there's this underlying belief that when you start to educate people without them knowing, that's in some ways the best kind of education. So the wonderful thing about video games, as we all know, is that it's experiential, and you start developing habits that, as we heard from previous speakers, that then become our reality. So this was a completely easy one and to incorporate, because it fit very much the narrative of this simple game, and we got great feedback for it.
Yeah, I think that's the same for us. If it fits the narrative, it feels authentic. If it's part of the core pillars already, then it's natural, and our players resonate a lot with it. If I would have to think of something that we thought was remiss, in Alba Wildlife Explorer, we do have an initiative where we plant a tree for every download of the game. But we didn't represent it in the game in any way, and I thought, oh, we could have done that. We could have had 1 million trees suddenly pop up in the game, because that's how many trees we planted as a result. So I think that's something that I think our players, as well as we, would have appreciated doing. I also want to mention, so at yesterday's SDG and Games Summit, one of the speakers, Matthias, who is the CEO of Cybo, had said one of their initiatives, he knew he was successful at it when they got a lot of lashback from certain players. And that was a way of just saying, not only did we step forward, but we stepped almost further than we wanted to go, which was great. Then we made a difference. We made an impact.
I'll step back a little bit as to why I think games are so powerful, not just as an entertainment medium, but a medium for impact. And this isn't all games. Games have many different genres, many different flavors, many different platforms. But games let you step into a different role or identity, which in itself is powerful. Crucially, you have agency. Games are about verbs, thinking verbs, action verbs. You have agency to act. And a lot of people don't feel like they have agency in the real world, but you have agency in the game world. Crucially, you have agency towards a goal you're invested in. Sometimes that's an individual goal, sometimes it's a collective goal. Very powerful when it's a collective goal. Then, and this is really the art of great game designers, you constantly you fail safely, you fail evocatively, often fun, and you get feedback. You get feedback towards the goal you're invested in, and you keep leveling up close to the goal. I mean, that's behavior change, that's learning. You can map that to almost anything. So when I think about where we would like to go, the holy grail is that you can take that blend of design and activities and go from the virtual to the real world. So we've gotten pretty good as a community at getting some nudges. I mean, millions of trees planted. I mean, real difference. But I think the next step is, how do we sustain that engagement? Because there's some agency in the game, there's some agency in planting the tree, but then getting the feedback loop that my agency made a difference and that collectively we're getting closer to the goals that we want. I think we can get there, but we're not there yet. We need to keep working at it. And there's a concept of games as a product, a game that you play and finish, like our Never Alone game is a story game. You play and you finish it, versus a game as a service that never ends, like a Minecraft or a World of Warcraft. It's intriguing to think about a game as a service mapped to real world game loops where you're constantly optimizing for engagement, perhaps for financial return, but also for impact. So, we've laid, I think, the groundwork to a lot of credit playing for the planet, trading best practices, but we're just scratching the surface of where we can go.
No, definitely. And maybe just to toss it to you, Sam, Alan was just saying that they've learned from other people within the Alliance. What have been some of the interesting collaborations that you've seen come out of the Alliance, or knowledge sharing, or little nuggets that you've seen as a part of that community that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened?
So at GDC, there was a great discussion which was hosted by Xbox and Fortnite, talking about how you can dial down the energy in the game. The players didn't even notice, and it made a massive difference in energy consumption, so it saved players money. So just tweaking the frame rate, just dialing down the graphics. Everyone just thinks everything needs to be up to the top. It doesn't. And I think that, particularly for Fortnite and Epic, to take a judgment around that, where people always say, you cannot touch the quality of the provision of the game. Actually, you can, and the naked eye doesn't see it. So I think the way that Xbox and Fortnite thought about that together was fascinating. And they've given guidance that I think hopefully will become best practice for others to follow. That's one. I also think the research area, we did a survey of 390,000 gamers from the Green Game Jam in 2022. And the insight on that was when you play a game with a green kind of component in it, the uptick in terms of awareness and opportunity rose from, I think, 70 to 82%. So games can make a difference around knowledge, attitudes, and practice. But I think we need to do a lot more rigor around the research to really understand and deepen that. But my other thought I have on this is that I think the games industry is really special. And I think we're choosing to work with the games industry because it can do things with an audience that not any other medium can do. And so you have a relationship, you have people returning back, you have community, and you have such a strong affinity. Like people play games for 10, 20, 30 years because it's what they do, who they are, and it's part of their identity. And so the power of games to be transformative through that relationship with IP and individuals is really strong. And what I've started to notice is games as culture, but also games as a leadership industry that music and other entertainment sectors can then follow is where we're trying to get to. So I think from our side at UN Environment, we could do no end of different things with different sectors to make a difference. But we've chosen to drop our anchor with the games industry because we think this industry can do remarkable things if it chooses to. And our role is not to tell people what to do, but to facilitate a conversation to see how people can learn across. So I do think that horizontal piece is important, but to set best practice around how do you decarbonize? Where is your liability? Where isn't your liability? And if you're going to do a green activation in game, here are some things that have worked, here are some things that haven't worked, and how can you go about it? So I feel for me, Deb, with the three great people here with the studios on the panel, we've only really just got started. And I think the Playing for the Planet Alliance is a community of practice where you can come and learn. And that's what we're here to do.
And just picking up on, if they choose to, or if it chooses to, looking at the studios and the people that work within your studios, I think, maybe 5 years ago when I kind of started this work of games and social impact, it wasn't that widespread. Where I'm sure, if we talk to Susanna as well, if you look at Games for Change like 10 years ago, I'm sure it didn't look the way it does now. Like it's starting to become much more mainstream and part of our consciousness. But how has it been, for you within your studios to try to get people on board? And how has that process changed? And what's the difference like between a studio, for example, like Eline, where I think that is there right from the beginning and people who come to work there know what your kind of mission is and what the purpose is, versus maybe, a Ubisoft where you have thousands of employees who may not all row in the same direction. So what does it look like for each of your studios to try to change the culture within it? And how has that changed over time? And has it gotten easier? What are some of the challenges still?
I think it's already part of our studio, like you were saying, for Eline Media. It's also part of the leadership team really pushes for this. It's part of our gate process to make sure that we're doing social impact initiatives in our games. And it's part of our socials, like we go out and we make sure we're doing sustainably minded, nature connecting events. We did a kayaking trip recently, it was super fun. So just make it a part of your culture. And I remember when I joined, or I think it was like a couple of years after I joined, I said, well, I don't know how I can influence the culture at this, where I work. And Maria Science, the CEO, looked at me and she goes, you've been here 2 years, you've already influenced the culture. And I think you can do the same with your companies too. Just be a part of it and then sneak it in the sustainability.
Well, I think that's probably true at Ubisoft, although we're not purpose-driven in the same way. I hear a lot of people talk about, well, we're here to make great games. And yet and we have studios too with 35 people and studios with 3,000 and plus. So we have the whole range. And I think what ends up happening is it's a combination of having people who are like-minded, who jump on something and says, you know what, this is an innovation that seems to really be exciting and an opportunity. There's a bit of a long tail, or maybe it's not even a long tail, but if it's a bell curve of people who are really strongly, who completely believe that this is something that we need to do, there are outliers. And the outliers, and I don't know if this has happened to any of you, but we've had people accuse us of being too woke and that's a bad thing to be kind of sensitive to what the world is talking about. But at the same time, they're a very small minority. So for us, there is this notion of normalizing certain kinds of behavior, whether it's having trans characters in our games and having non-binary operators, or having basically a reflection of what's happening within our studio, the people shown within our games. So it's quite feasible, and I feel like I've said the word normalize a couple times, but it's such an important element of how we choose to make games in a general sense, is that we have to be relevant, specific, action-oriented, and be conscious of the word that you both used in terms of the culture that we're developing. So there's an element of this which is kind of like the seatbelt analogy. When seatbelts were first introduced, there were protests against seatbelts. People said, "You're taking away my rights." But now it's quite normal, even in places where I don't have to wear a seatbelt. I put a seatbelt on, like the parking lot or driving into my driveway. So it's become so natural and part of who we are that that's exactly the trend we're seeing also with more conscious game development, whether it's green or other kinds of diversity and social responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a purpose-driven company like ours, you have to align all the stakeholders, the investors, the team, the partners, and that's not always easy because this is making games is hard. And if you're competing in the consumer space, you're competing for discretionary time or dollars with everyone else out there. If you're working in the classroom, you're replacing some time or money somewhere. The publishing side is in some ways as important as the design and development side. And it's not just the marketing, it's the rigor of is there a place for this in the world? And because it's hard and there's lots of twists and turns and challenges, when the times get tough, the stakeholders need to be aligned on what are your impact objectives, what are your financial objectives, what's your risk tolerance, and that's the day-to-day hard work but it's unbelievably rewarding. I've been doing games for 30 years. It hasn't gotten any easier, but we've gotten better at it, and it's become more rewarding.
And you said you just mentioned something about like the hard conversations that you need to have. Can you give me an example of maybe what have been some of the more challenging conversations you've had to have in your studio to try to align people, or where maybe it hasn't gone so well, or what's been
I think when we first joined Playing for the Planet, we were trying to figure out our footing and where do we belong in this big organization full of big companies like Ubisoft, but also like really esteemed companies like Eline Media. And I think we're also trying to figure out, okay, well, what can we do? We don't have a live service game. How can we participate in the Green Game Jam? So with all of these things, we were just like, let's just try it. Let's just do what we can and see how far we get. And now here I am on stage with Playing for the Planet with the UN. It's incredible. So yeah, it's tough, but risk reward, right? It's paid off.
I'm going to be inspired by something Jennifer said, and that is that within a large company, and even within a small company, to Alan's point, there's always this question of ROI, right? So what exactly is this going to get us? And being nice is not considered to be a very strong note on the financial statement. So it's not about being nice. We had to really make the decision, and being part of the alliance and Playing for the Planet, there were naysayers who didn't understand, well, how does this make sense? How is this going to improve the quality of the game, the experience, or the engagement of our players? But the great news is that the more that we do it, the more that it becomes self-evident. And so it's getting over that initial hurdle of kind of the naysayers, or the people who don't automatically or intuitively understand why that's an advantage. So and there were people, I think, when we first joined, Sam will tell you, within our organization, it's like, I'm not really sure why we're doing this. Sounds like a good idea, but now there's a lot more people who are both adept and who have embraced it because they see the genuine outcomes.
Actually, Sam, when you first sort of got going with Playing for the Planet, what were some of the conversations you had with studios to try to get them on board? What were some of the things you said that really convinced people, and what didn't work? Because maybe there are also people in the audience who are just starting on that journey, or you're working in a studio where you're trying to get more people on board, or you're trying to champion the cause. Like what is helpful there?
Well, maybe if I could just I mean, because we're just talking at you, not with you. We wanted to have a Q&A, but that's not possible. So I'd just love to just get a show of hands or maybe just a couple of questions, Deb. So one is like, how worried are people about what's happening in the environment right now? Like high, medium, low? Okay, yeah, we're all in the high category. In terms of what you're doing about it in your professional work, either in a studio or slightly to the parallel about this, are you doing nothing, something, a lot? Okay, that's more mixed. And then in terms of my last question is, in terms of what you could do you have no idea what to do? So if you have no idea, put your hand up. Okay, if you have some ideas but need a hand, put your hand up. Okay, and if you have all the ideas and you don't need a hand, put your hand up. Okay, so I think everyone's in that some ideas space. And I think the some ideas space for me is probably more about courage and bravery. No one is paying you to do this. This is a choice you're making in addition to what you're being asked to in your terms of reference. But it's all about our civic responsibility to see how we can make a difference. The second point is to work out how you can make the case to win. And Jeffrey Burrell, I don't know if he's in the room, but yesterday he was sharing with us around spending a lot of time to get insight about what the gamers are interested in and using that as your evidence base. So you depersonalize it. It's not like, I think this should happen. It's like, I know this should happen. And then the other point is, once you've got that evidence base about what the players want, thinking around the touch points that you can take to make a difference. And I think sometimes it's choosing the easy place to start that can grow, or to take on the hardest nut to crack that can have impact that will take time. You need to make a choice about which battle you want to fight. And I think from my side, this is a journey around imperfection. So don't worry about being right, just make a start. It's a journey about thinking through who's on your team. So you don't do this alone. You have at least 1 or 2 people working with you on this. And then the other thing is to knock on other people's doors so they can help you through the journey they've gone through to help you go faster, rather than repeat their mistakes so then you go slower because you haven't figured out a better way of getting things done. So for me, we could talk about this a lot, about all the great things that have happened in the world, but really it's about us as people and how we work as individuals within an organization to make a difference. And I think what we're trying to do is unlock agency, give validation, and give the best ideas that we think you can have to be transformative in the world that we need to have right now. One thing I haven't mentioned is everything is going, is not great right now in terms of temperature, wildlife, biodiversity, pollution. So we are doing egregious harm to the world. But we've got this window right now to kind of start pulling that back. And so for me, what I would really recommend is to have the premium on speed and urgency and not a premium on perfection. So just getting started rather than really agonizing about worrying about getting it wrong. So that's what I would say. And then just in terms of the quick narrative, I'll just give 2 briefly. One is I really liked how Jim Ryan spoke to Phil Spencer to say there's many things we can agree to disagree on, but on climate and the environment, this is one thing we need to work on together.
There's our head of studios at Microsoft and Sony.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And they agreed to come together to work on this collectively, and that made a hell of a difference. And then other people made commitments that were really lowball, like single-digit commitments, decarbonize. And we said, they came back with double-digit. We said, not good enough. They came back with about probably 10x on what they originally came to us with. We said, that's a great start. And so we created a bar that allowed them to move a very large and very significant company and gave agency to an individual to get the CEO to do something he'd always wanted to do, but never had permission to do off the back of the relationship we then created with this individual. So I think our role at the UN is to really facilitate leadership, encourage leadership, and just give tools to allow people to have agency and to create bars that people should jump through, but try and really focus on decarbonization as a thing of compliance. Let's just get that thing ticked off and done. The games industry isn't cement, it's not transport, it's not aviation, it's an easy win if we get it right. But really the activations in games is where I think the real power is, and that's what we want to spend our time on if we can.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think. The great thing about playing for the planet, and I think everyone would agree, is we just keep meeting people at companies all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world, where there are folks in those studios, sometimes at the top leadership, sometimes at various levels, who are passionate about this. And I think that's what's so powerful about the Alliance. And there's other theories of change for how to do this. There's no one right way. I'll throw a few others out there. One that we're passionate about, we have another company called Endless Studios. It's about youth game making. And if you look at like Minecraft and Roblox together, it's probably the 5th largest religion in the world. I mean, Buddhism is catching it, but it's close. But the number of young people that are creators, not just consumers, are massive. And when you make a game about a subject, you kind of have to become an expert because you're designing a system around that subject. I know a lot about Alaska Native culture, having worked on Never Alone. I've learned a lot about the ocean. So I think youth game making at all levels around environmental themes is a very powerful theory of change for knowledge, for behavior. So that's a whole other category. When you talk about things that we wish we had done, we wish we had more activations built into the organic game loops. One that we didn't get in, but we will in future versions. And by the way, often it's the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th iteration of a game that's successful. I used to run the studios at Activision many years ago, and I just observed that our first games, we were just kind of figuring out the technology, the game loops, and then we got better and better, and then a game would just take off. It's not always the case. So I do think resiliency matters here. So with Beyond Blue, where we want to go with the franchise, one thing is to embed citizen science. We've been looking for citizen science platforms that can scale to 1 million or plus players. There's a guy named Attila who's going to do a talk here later. I encourage you to attend. He's doing great stuff around games and citizen science. There's a new platform with Gautam Shah from Internet of Elephants, who's part of Playing for the Planet. It just launched this week. If you're interested, it's called Fathomverse.game. They're looking for beta testers now. It's an ocean citizen science game done in partnership with the Monterey Bay Research Institute. The head of technology, Kakani, there is absolutely amazing. You can sign up right now. There's like 1,500 slots, so I encourage you to. But that's another theory of change because it's game-based citizen science. It's like Foldit and other things if you know those platforms. So there's actually a diversity of theories of change that we can just get better and better at.
And we're almost out of time here, but just drawing on that theory of change, is that something that you also think of at Ubisoft and as ustwo, like when you are starting development? Do you have an end goal or a purpose when you're thinking about the way you're designing your game?
Absolutely. And then for me, it's about that word I said earlier, which is activating. Activating not just us as developers, but activating our players to get out there and make some change happen.
How about you, Liz?
So how is a first-person shooter game green? You have to think about how, where do you integrate sustainability issues into those kinds of things? So although there's always a clear project plan and there's many stage gates at which there's opportunities to talk about innovations and new ideas we bring in, I think that what has been the most useful for certain of our games, it's easy if you can plant a tree and then we plant a tree on your behalf. Clearly, there's it's an easy link. Saving a game related to the ocean, an easy link. When you have a game like Rainbow Six Siege, we did it in more of a stealth mode. So to the average viewer, it would not necessarily be a green component, but it was built in with one of the operations where you had to actually manage a lab. And if you didn't manage it in an eco-friendly way, if you didn't reduce your energy consumption and have it in such a way that it was very energy efficient, then you couldn't progress. So that's the kind of model which is like a stealth mode, right? You're not going out there saying, hey, save the oceans, which is laudable in itself, but it's within the context of the game. How do you think of sustainability actions that normalize, again, that word, but turn that into the way, the natural way of operating? So in some ways, games that are not specifically ecologically or environmentally oriented have a different kind of challenge and opportunity to really represent sustainability, because then the teams have to think more clearly about, okay, what does this look like if we were to create a sustainable world? What would the issues that the operators or your avatar is going to do what in this kind of context? So that's a new kind of challenge that I think people are really rising to.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really good point. And before we go, we'll get to the beginning question in a second. But just in 30 seconds, what do you see in the next 5 years when it comes to sustainability in games and the way that we relate to our players? Sam?
So I'd say speed and scale. I think they're the two things that I'm interested in. But also, I really think listening deeply to your community is the best place to start. Because if you make assumptions, you're going to make mistakes. And if you work with people, they can join you on your journey. So really listening deeply, both with peers and with the community you're there to serve, I think can make a hell of a difference. So listen deep, then speed and scale would be the two things I'd say.
Great. How about you, Elon?
For me, I think it goes back to what I was saying before. It's finding the agency towards collective goals and the continual feedback loop that your agency is making a difference in the fictional space as well as the real world.
Yeah, the feedback loop.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I think that breaking that fourth wall and saying there is a connection between what you do in the game and what you do in the real world. And personally for me, it's also getting players to be more climate activists. And I'd love to see how in our game can we encourage that.
I'm going to echo everything everyone said, but there's this element of implicit and explicit, right? That there are specific things you can do to take action. People will see themselves reflected, see the impact of what they do that happens in real life as well as in their games. But that there's also this kind of ongoing learning and turning it into, well, that's the way we need to operate. That's the way we need to live, where it becomes not necessarily this big pedagogical moment, but it is simply integrated into the games in such a way that people learn to believe that, well, that's the normal way of behaving. So it'll have that explicit, as well as the more implicit component.
Great. Okay, and with 30 seconds to go, we had Up For It from Sam. Do you feel up for it, audience? Yeah? All right, good. Who could remember what Alan's was? Because that's the only one I don't have written down. Shout it out from the crowd. Intrigued.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Do we feel intrigued? Okay,
That's a good one. Yeah, good. Yeah.
If we want to be parallel, it's actually nervous. Intrigued was later, but
Well, this
that's
is what
okay.
we want them
Okay,
to feel.
okay.
But do you still feel nervous or do you feel better?
I still feel nervous.
Still nervous. We tried. With Jennifer, it was activated. Are you feeling that too? Okay. I love how we're clapping.
Yeah.
And then we also had energized from Leslie. Amazing. So hopefully we've managed to set you forth with the emotions that we wanted everyone to feel. But thank you so much for joining us as well. And
Thank you.
we will be around to chat more.